Mr. Kerrigan is here today to give us a presentation. We don't know really any more about it than any of the rest of you. So, Chris, at this point, I welcome you, and I'm sorry for the road conditions, but join the rest of us today. We were all kind of late trying to get through the road. So, welcome, and I will now turn it over to you. And
thank you, Chair Pfluger and honorable board members. It's my pleasure to address you here today. It definitely beats sitting in the office back in Sacramento. So I'll come at the drop of a hat if I'm invited. So I'm happy to be here to address you today, and I thank Supervisor Pfluger for the 10 a.m. reprieve for my start, even though we got started a little later than that. But yes, I wanted to talk a little bit about the civil enforcement project that we have proposed this year under the governor's budget. It was approved by the legislature, and it's essentially a joint project with the Department of Fish and Wildlife, where we're going to engage in the enforcement, the development of a regulatory program, education and outreach to the regulated public, and interagency coordination to try to eradicate the environmental effects of cultivation under Proposition 215. And there's a lot of different legal nuances to what that means, but we're essentially looking, because the Water Board is not a law enforcement entity, we're a regulatory agency. And so what we can do is we can regulate the discharge of pollutants to waters of the state or waters of the U.S., but we can also curb or stop illegal diversions of water rights and fine people who refuse to stop their illegal diversions. So we're looking at both this problem from a supply side for water, and then also from a water quality standpoint in terms of the types of pollutants and discharges that would be put into waters of the United States. We're not really involved in trespass grows or law enforcement operations on public lands, except to the extent we may be a consulting agency on restoration work. And we have a lot of expertise to lend to situations there. But basically on public lands, it's a removal type operation where the cultivators and their operation should be removed, and then the property should be restored. And the State Water Board has some funds that can assist in situations like that from the cleanup and abatement account. Also, the Department of Toxic Substances Control can help remove hazardous substances like fuels or rodenticides. And then the CalRecycle can actually help remove municipal trash on these trespass sites and also on large agricultural operations like ranches and timber properties. So we all have a little bit of money available to help with orphan site cleanup, but I'm not sure that's going to be enough. It's more of a Band-Aid type approach for these sites. Regulation and enforcement on private land is a completely different story. I'm sure you've heard the citizens of your county describe the type of habitat degradation. I'm not going to spend a lot of detail on this text, but water diversion is a big one, pesticide use, rodenticide use, mainly dirt and sediment from grading. And it's not just the grading of the site itself, it's the grading of all the access roads and the attendant buildings and other things. And the grades are improperly cut, oftentimes not engineered, too steep, and destined to fail. I've got a couple of photos that are from the North Coast Regional Water Board, Stormer Filer. He is one of our top inspectors and investigators. You can see here a site with all kinds of garbage and trash piled up. And a lot of this is used soil too that's laced with nitrogen that will seep in a rain event. You can see here that there's timber removed and that the roads are being built. But basically, as was described earlier in the discussion of the public letter to Fish and Wildlife and the resource agencies, it's a conversion of forest and grasslands to a more intense use, and then sometimes a very intense agricultural use. Here you can see runoff from sediment from an improperly graded area, and this is real typical, if not less average than what we would normally see. So what we've done is we have 11 people in the water boards that have been added in this year's budget on a one-year term to implement our pilot project. We also have 7 fish and game wardens and biologists. And you heard the gentleman Jerry speak from the audience earlier, I believe his name was Jerry, speak from the audience earlier. We believe that boots on the ground in these watersheds is the appropriate way to address environmental degradation. So if people hold themselves out as those who are growing marijuana for medicinal purposes under the Compassionate Use Act, then we want to make sure they're doing it in a way that's environmentally responsible. Now, if you're growing on public land, that's per se illegal. You can't have permission to grow on public land. And of course, there's the whole interplay with federal law. But under California law, it's legal to grow for medicinal purposes. So the way we're divided up, we have 2 regional water boards where we're going to implement the pilot program. And one is the North Coast Regional Water Board, which has jurisdiction over Mendocino, Trinity, Humboldt counties. So we want to focus our effort in these counties, and then the other is the Central Valley Regional Board, and we're looking basically at there from about Red Bluff on up, and the tributaries there to the north. So we're really focusing our effort on the North State. I want to say too is that our water rights tools are not as strong as our water quality tools. So to stop someone from diverting water illegally or storing water illegally, we have to go out and issue them a cease and desist order. Then if they violate that cease and desist order, we can start to fine them up to $1,000 per day. So we need to get our boots on the ground out there to do these inspections and issue the cease and desist orders. And you might be asking yourself, well, how does that work with some fly-by-night operator or someone who's a transient operator or grower? And the answer is it works because you can enforce those against the landowners. So some of the beauty of our project is that it's focused on private landowners who lease or provide their property or either engage in the cultivation themselves or lease or provide it to others for that purpose. Now we have to exercise some discretion in working with landowners who may not be aware that this is taking place on their property. And so you want to look into that and see more and do more investigation. My office, Office of Enforcement, we've been around for 8 years. I'm a trial lawyer and prosecutor by trade. I have 11 lawyers in my office that are trial lawyers, prosecutors by trade. I also have 20 investigators at my disposal. And so this is the kind of thing we usually figure out is, did the landowner really know what was going on his property, or should he have known, or he or she have known what was going on the property? In any event, that landowner is going to be responsible for restoring the property and making sure that it's used in an environmentally responsive way in the future. For water quality violations like those sediment banks that you've seen or discharges to waters, you can fine up to $10,000 a day and $10 per gallon for discharges of wastes to waters of the U.S. or waters of the state. And that means sediment, pesticides, rodenticides, nutrients in soil, any kind of discharge would be not permitted. So we have very strong water quality tools, and when we combine those with our water rights in my office that are trial lawyers, prosecutors by trade. I also have 20 investigators at my disposal. And so this is the kind of thing we usually figure out is, did the landowner really know what was going on his property, or should he have known, or he or she have known what was going on the property? In any event, that landowner is going to be responsible for restoring the property and making sure that it's used in an environmentally responsive way in the future. For water quality violations like those sediment banks that you've seen or discharges to waters, you can fine up to $10,000 a day and $10 per gallon for discharges of wastes to waters of the U.S. or waters of the state. And that means sediment, pesticides, rodenticides, nutrients in soil, any kind of discharge would be not permitted. So we have very strong water quality tools, and when we combine those with our water rights tools, we're hoping to find a solution on basically a watershed by watershed type basis. Our plan with Fish and Wildlife is to put boots on the ground and do targeted inspections where the activities are acute. And so what we'll look at is where stream flows have been diminished, or where there's chocolate water flowing at a time of year when that isn't caused by storm events. And then we'll go and target those streams and do a series of inspections. Our project contemplates that we will be supported by law enforcement to some extent. So none of my guys have guns or badges. So we cannot go onto sites where we don't have consent from the property owner or a warrant to search the site. So we work closely with law enforcement to obtain those, and the Fish and Wildlife Wardens can be our law enforcement arm. We've done a couple of preliminary forays out into the streams and areas that contribute to the Sacramento River with Butte County Sheriff and Butte County Council's office. We combine our actions with code enforcement, grading violations. Grading ordinance is a really important thing to have, by the way, if you can get one. And we can help you with that if you're interested. But those kinds of code enforcement actions combined with water code authority, Fish and Wildlife stream bed alteration, 1600 authority, and all the various tools we have in our environmental basket can be put together so that when we go out on a series of inspections, we would treat each property owner a little bit differently depending on their circumstance. Some may be criminal enforcement actions where there's no claim of medical marijuana cultivation. It's just a commercial operation, not a collective, no claim. Some may be cleanup and abatement orders issued through our office, and those can be issued by the executive officer of the North Coast region without right to a pre-deprivation hearing, which means they become effective upon issuance, and you get your hearing as to whether they should be effective after the fact. Which means you've got to stop discharging and polluting and diverting illegally until you've had your hearing in front of the board. But these are not gray area type cases. We're looking at cases where the discharge is clear, the threat of discharges is clear, and the diversion is obvious because the infrastructure is in place to cause the diversion. So we do a lot of enforcement in front of the water boards. Any violations of a cleanup and abatement order are $10,000 per day. So if we give you 30 days to clean your site up and you don't do it, you start racking up fines at the level of $10,000 per day. Code enforcement is another really good option for certain facilities that may have unpermitted, where the discharge is clear, the threat of discharges is clear, and the diversion is obvious because the infrastructure is in place to cause the diversion. So we do a lot of enforcement in front of the water boards. Any violations of a cleanup and abatement order are $10,000 per day. So if we give you 30 days to clean your site up and you don't do it, you start racking up fines at the level of $10,000 per day. Code enforcement is another really good option for certain facilities that may have unpermitted uniform building code, uniform electrical code violations, grading ordinance violations, and other violations of the code. So we kind of combine each of our tools or all of our tools, figure out where best to venue the case, figure out who's going to take the lead after the inspections, and then we go about and do it. So for example, we looked at 6 sites recently in Butte County in a watershed that feeds into Sacramento ultimately, and 2 of the sites were fine. They were graded on flat areas far from stream beds, and the acreage was minimal, so we didn't take any action on those sites. They were also using well water to which they had a right to extract on their sites. So 2 of the sites were perfectly fine. 3 of the sites were needed a lot of teaching and education about stream setbacks and better management practices at the site, like containment on their fuel so that if there was a spill, they would be contained. We gave them a lot of information. Those will be code enforcement actions through the county council's office, and then we will also issue a cleanup and abatement order to make sure that those property parties follow through, get their sites buttoned up, and do a good job in the future keeping things from being discharged into the water. All of them demonstrated that they had a water right as well. The last site was a real problem, and actually was causing almost all the problems in this watershed that we identified for all of the 6 people that we inspected. So they had graded road cuts that were way in excess of safely engineered and had already slumped into the stream bed. There were big piles of sediment waiting to be washed away in the first flush. They had a waste pit dug near the creek. They had fuel stored in plastic with no secondary containment, and they had no water right to divert because they weren't adjacent. They didn't have a right to divert from where they were actually taking the water, which was up above. So we have a cease and desist order, a cleanup and abatement order, and the sheriff and the DA are looking at how they might want to proceed in that case. But at least we're going to take civil enforcement. So our idea is to go out